Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Stephanie?
We can. Thanks so much, Beth.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I got off mute. Good afternoon, everybody. We put objectives in here because I'm an educator and we have to do that. So what we're going to talk about are the concerns that exist with computer-based testing that also exist with paper testing in the classroom, and what we've done with an iPad-only deployment to address that using ExamSoft. Um, as well as using feedback appropriately for students so that we reduce the need to individually micro-examine every single question, which also helps with the security issue. Um, so we're going to start talking about the program that I'm involved with, and we have, in the last few years, gone up to a cohort size of 72 students per class. It's a 3-year program, so we have about 216 students at any given time. Until recently, we were using paper testing and Scantron testing, which, for those of you who do that, know what an exhaustive amount of paper that takes, as well as man hours to copy, to score, to rescore. Um, Issues that we started to see, we had students getting really creative. When we would hand back Scantrons for them to review, they would change them and hand them back in and argue for points. We had students who, if we had faculty who posted the key on a hallway or on a wall, the students were being very stealthy about taking cell phones up and photocopying, all kinds of really interesting things. And the other thing that happened historically for our program was that in 2012 we had university support for an iPad deployment for our incoming cohort of doctoral students, and we've been able to continue that through course fees since. So now all of our students that come into the program receive an iPad when they come in. It is theirs. If they complete the program, they're allowed to keep it. They are responsible for upkeep, maintenance, replacing broken screens, etc. So that allowed us to do a single device deployment for ExamSoft, which made life really easy for us. One set of policies, one set of techniques, and narrowed the creativity window just a bit. We discovered ExamSoft actually at an educational leadership conference in Nashville. Another presenter was talking about it, and my ears kind of perked up. So I came back to Kentucky and started talking about the possibility of using the program with our program director and the rest of our administration. We got in touch with ExamSoft, did a small webinar, and we decided, okay, let's try this. And so we did a small pilot. We had 2 courses per class per semester using it. So all years of the program were using it, but only a couple of classes. And immediately discovered that we needed to develop some policies related to how it was used, what the testing environment looked like, what students needed to do, not do, all of those kinds of things. The other thing that happened is that ExamSoft continued to grow and evolve and developed some policies or some mechanisms for remote deletion of assessments, for delayed review possibilities so that they didn't have to review the test immediately after taking it. And so there were kind of ongoing changes that happened that we'll talk about a little bit as we go through this afternoon, that made things a little bit easier for us. So some of the policies we started developing actually related to how the faculty developed their tests, because they all had test questions that they were uploading and creating new questions. And one of the things that we talked about was we need to randomize the items at the question level so that every student who gets a specific question gets a different version of the order the answers were in. Now, ExamSoft does give you the ability to lock certain things in place. So if there's one that you always want to be first or last, you can do that. Otherwise, at the question level, you can tell it, I want to randomize my answers. Then as they were building their tests, we needed to remind them to continue to randomize the sequence of their questions so that we have 72 students in a classroom. They're all sitting next to each other. They're all getting a different test, essentially. And we didn't have to generate versions A, B, C, D. The software did it for us. So that even if there is a glance, they're not necessarily going to be looking at the same question, at the same answer choices, in the same order, in the same sequence. Now, they do give you the ability to group questions together. So if you have 3 or 4 questions that are built around a specific case, you can label them so that they do stay together in a specific order. And then that group of questions gets randomized throughout the test. So they give you a lot of ability to customize, as well as to make sure that you're providing things in as scattered a method as you can so that you're providing security to those questions. One of the things that we discovered along the way that was kind of an unexpected consequence, as you're building questions, they have the ability to put in a title. And I had a faculty member who didn't even think about it and put in a title maybe related to a diagnosis that was related to the answer to the question. And what we discovered was the students can see those titles when the question is deployed. So we quickly learned to be a lot more cautious about the title that we put on the question. So I put a screenshot in here of a component that runs along the left-hand side of the assessment screen that shows you some of the security options. Secure is automatically checked for our system. The randomized sequence is what we make sure that everyone checks. If a faculty member has forgotten to randomize the choices in their questions, they can do that at the assessment level here by checking that box right below. And that gives them the ability to not have to go into each and every question in their question bank and randomize the choices. Now, if you have locked things in place, checking it here at the assessment level will not override, which is good, because if you want things to stay in place, they're going to stay in place. But this will randomize anything that you forgot to randomize. We're also able to put time limits, so we no longer get the, you didn't give me my last 3 minutes of my test. The clock starts from the minute they log in. So everybody potentially could have a different start time because it may take someone a few more seconds to get into the test. But you can set that time limit on the assessment level and it locks them out once that time is up. They are able to set a 5-minute warning if they want. You can do that as well, but I find enough students don't want it that I let them make that choice at the test level. The other thing that I'll say here is that we do have multiple students on testing accommodations for disabilities, and if there's an extended time option, that can be built into the system too, and it's granted automatically when we put the time limit in, so we don't have to worry about that, which is nice. One of the other things that we quickly discovered was that students would forget. We would tell them, please charge it, please leave this piece of memory free, you must download your test before you come in, and we'd get all level of excuses on that. So we actually had to develop a policy for our syllabus, and this is what the language looks like that goes into all of our syllabus at a minimum. There are some faculty who have extra language. But basically it says you must bring your iPad to class. Forgetting your iPad is not an excuse for not being able to take your test. You must charge your iPad. It must be charged to at least 50%. When we started using ExamSoft, that was the requirement, was 50% power and 500 megabytes of memory. They have since reduced that requirement, but we've left it there because we want them to exceed that. We still have days where we are helping students to delete videos, large files, TV shows to expose more memory on their iPad, but that is kind of our policy. So if any of these things are not met, they know that they can be dinged. They have to download their test within the window. If they don't, their grade can drop if we have to push another download for anything other than a technical reason. And you can tell through the portal if someone has downloaded. We've gotten the excuse of, I downloaded it and it just disappeared. and you can actually go in and see if that download actually was done or was attempted. Um, Most often what it is that the student thinks they've downloaded when they've actually downloaded a test for another class, and so they really need to pay attention to the title. Um, as I said, we've put all of that into the syllabi of each and every class. It will run, the test will run on the iPad if it is plugged in, so we also tell them to bring a power cord just in case they are losing memory or losing power. During the test, the typical testing mechanisms of you must have everything off your desk is our rule. We have had some faculty go to the extremes of all bags piled into a corner of the room far away from the desks. We generally do not allow water bottles, especially those that are not see-through. There are some faculty who, if the bottle is clear and they can see that there's nothing there, they will allow it. But for the most part, no water bottles. We do not allow them to wear hats. We do have one student with a reduced lighting accommodation, and she is allowed to wear her hat. However, it has to be examined before they go into the test. Cell phones get put away. The new one that has come out is smartwatches must be put away. And we've actually gotten to the point now where we say, everybody take your watch off. Because although the Apple Watch and some of the Gears and the Garmin's look like smartwatches, there are newer versions coming out that just look like an everyday watch. So we now are saying put all your watches away. To get into the test, they have to go into what's called guided access, which is one of the accessibility features on the iPad. I think it was actually developed by Apple for parents who wanted to lock their kids into a specific app so they couldn't bounce out and go over to another app and order, $50 worth of Candy Crush extras. It's a triple click on the circle button, and that locks them into the app. That has to be activated for them to be able to access the test. They also have to be in what's called airplane mode, which means the Wi-Fi is disabled. And so those two components lock them into the test and do not allow them to be actively in a test and come out of that without kicking them out of the exam. We have had some issues where either they didn't update the latest version of the app, or they had a glitch with a video and it kicked them out, and we are able to get them back in again with a resume code. But we do monitor that, and we'll talk about what we do with that a little bit later. The other thing is that the program is, the ExamSoft is constantly looking at their device and taking snapshots to see how many photographs they have on their device. And so you have a running total. If that ever changes, then you know they've taken a screenshot. But they should not be able to do that during the test because it's deactivated. We also have started handing out scratch paper rather than allowing students to bring their own in. We have gotten to the point now where not only do we have them put name, date, and class at the top of the paper, but some of the faculty will use a random symbol or a random highlighter color or something to note that this is the piece of paper that they've handed out. We tell the students that their iPads must be flat on the desk. ExamSoft does now allow them to use the Bluetooth keyboard. There is a workaround for them to be able to do that, but since all of our exams tend to be multiple choice, we don't allow them to use the keyboard, so the iPad stays flat on the desk. We have had some students who have significant neck pain or something like that, where they say, I really can't look down for 2 hours at a test. Then we just move them to the back of the room or to a side wall where they can tip it up and their screen is not in view with anyone else. So there are some adjustments that we can make. As I said earlier, there have been the occasional glitch where a student has gotten kicked out of an exam accidentally, not on purpose. And So we started using a policy that if anyone ever needed a resume code to get back into their test, then our program ExamSoft administrator was notified and their log file was looked over just to see how much time they were out of that test. Because generally, if it's an accidental exit, they're coming up to you fairly quickly to say, help, I got kicked out, I need to get back into my test, and you put the code in and they're back in. It's when we have a minute, 2 minutes that we're out of it that we start to really question what has happened, and then we'll look at the log also for changes in photographs or anything like that, so that we can make sure that security on the test wasn't compromised. At the end of the test, they have to hand their scratch paper to us, and they have to show us their green screen, which is the ExamSoft euphemism for yes, your exam has been uploaded. We used to just monitor the exam log, which would tell us which students had uploaded and which hasn't. But as ExamSoft has grown and evolved, it sometimes has a little bit of a delay showing who has uploaded their exam. And so we have come to the realization that if they can show us their green screen, their test is up. Now, what we also discovered was that students can pull up the green screen from any test they've uploaded that is on that app. So we need to make sure that we're looking at the green screen to see the title of the test and make sure it is our test that they're showing us that they uploaded. So all kinds of creative little strategies are being used. The scratch paper that gets turned into us, we collect and shred. So once we've collected it and done a head count of making sure we have all of the pieces of paper, we then give it to our office assistant staff to shred. Once all of that is done, students are allowed to get their backpacks, and then they have to leave the room immediately. So we really try to minimize the amount of time that people are viewing other screens, people are moving around the room, all of those kinds of things. ExamSoft does allow what's called secure review, which you have to activate when you post the test, so you have to know ahead of time that you want them to be able to review their exam right after they finish. And you can make the choice of whether you want them to be able to review every question on the test, just the ones they missed. They are still in secure mode, so they've hit end, and yes, it says, are you sure you want to exit? You won't be able to get back in, and they say yes. While they are still in secure mode, so guided access is still on, airplane mode is still on. It says, okay, now do you want to review your exam? And it gives them the choice, which is nice, because they don't have to. But there's a separate password entrance for the review. And so you give them that, they get into the review, they look at their items, then they hit exit from that and come out of guided access in airplane mode to up their test. Upload their test. We generally, if we allow review, we only have them review the missed items, and we put a significant time limit on that. So for a 60 to 80 question test, we may put a 10 to 15 minute review time and only allow them to review the missed items. You can allow them to see the rationale for the correct answer on a question if you want, and so that can give them some nice feedback right away. One of the things that we got from our students, though, was they didn't even want the option to be able to review immediately post-test during midterms and finals. Even though they had the ability to say, no, I don't want to review it, they didn't even want that option to show up because they felt like it was too stressful. So we've actually gotten to a policy now where we just don't review those immediately after. Our students have also started acting as kind of peer monitors, and we don't have significant amounts of cheating. I make it sound like we have all of these students being creative and crafty, but it does not happen often. About 50%, though, of what we do catch was caught by students. So that's kind of heartening, and that they're willing to kind of keep an eye on each other as well. excuse me, I apologize. Um, One of the things that was caught was during a delayed review, and we'll talk about that in a minute. A student was caught trying to take pictures of the delayed review screen with their cell phone. So, excuse me, the other thing that ExamSoft has put in is a delayed secure review. So again, when you're posting the exam, it will ask you what kind of review do you want to do. You want to do it immediately? Do you want to do it delayed? And it'll put in a date and time if you want to do it delayed. And they have to come in, go into the secure components again, guided access and airplane mode, and then you give them the password. So we only do delayed secure reviews in class with the same setup as the test. So everything gets put away, everything's off the tables, no talking during it, and all of that. And it has worked very successfully for us, for the folks that do allow review of the test. We do have some folks who do not allow students to review the test in that kind of setup. And so what they will do is called a private review. They'll set up a one-on-one meeting with a student. I apologize. They will pull up a PDF of the questions that that student missed. And if they have a lot of students, then they may let them kind of, sit in the hallway outside their door and monitor what they're doing as they look at that. But others will do it on the monitor of their computer and go over questions with them and see how they're reading the questions. So it gives a nice opportunity for some test-taking review as well. And so the way that works, excuse me, on the assessment screen, the assessment reports tab has a bunch of options. And you go down to this one down here where it says review results for exam takers. And it'll pull up the list of students that took that test, and you check the ones you want, and then you check the options that you want. So only missed questions, you want them to have the correct answer as well as their choice. And it will pull up a test review that looks something like this. So I only let this student pull up the incorrect questions. So they're only red. Pardon me. And it gives them the choice that they made as well as the correct option. And that way I can go through with them and talk them through why did you choose this one, what were the keywords you pulled out, that kind of thing. You can also, when you start reviewing tests, to look for not only security issues but test-taking issues, you can use what's called snapshot view, which just kind of gives you a blueprint of what they did on the test. And it's really nice because it's really straightforward. When you go into the assessment, you'll go to the tab that says Exam Taker Activity, and that will pull up a list of students. Now I've blocked out my students' names on the left-hand side here. But on the far right, you're going to click on this little camera. And when you do that for that particular test, it's going to pull up this list. I sort by timestamp, and so this one shows what that student did in a progression of time. So I can see how long they spent on a question. Did they go back? Did they go forward? How many times did they change their answer? And those can give you some ideas of kind of what the student's test-taking strategy is, or if they're spending an inordinate amount of time on one question, I'm going to want to know why. You can also download this into a spreadsheet view, which can also be kind of nice. I know this is really hard to read. It's a small print. But the other thing that I do with this is I sort by item number, by that left-hand column. And I can see how many times they went back to a specific question and how many times they changed their answer. And so sometimes this will give me security information. Sometimes this will just give me test-taking information. The other thing that we look at, I talked about with guided access, looking at the detailed log review if they have to use the resume code. Now this particular example does not have a resume code use in it, but this is what that log looks like. So you have to really want to look at this to be able to figure it out. But what this also gives you, and I'll highlight a sequence right here, is So what I've circled is the second question that was on the student's test, the sequence that it was put in, which is how it randomized it, the answer they chose, which is choice D, and the choice sequence was B. So that's just the computer speak for how it randomized it, but it tells me that of the randomization that it gave them, they chose D. I can pair this with the snapshot log because we have had students who come back and say, the computer changed my answer. I swear I chose C. And I can go look and say, no, you didn't. Here's what you chose, and here's what that translates to on the actual test. But you can look at timestamps in here because you see the timestamp on the left-hand side right after the date. This is also where it will occasionally recheck for number of photographs on the device, and it'll put a line in there that say photos taken, or total photos 388, total photos 388. It'll say again, total photos 388. If that number changes somewhere during that log, then I'm a little suspicious, and we're going to go back and look. So we use these for security. We also use them for test taking, which is another nice piece. I wanted to talk a little bit about the feedback piece because part of our struggle with test security is that students want to overanalyze each and every question, and there's value to looking at questions if it's how you're taking the test, how you're reading the question. If it's arguing points, we've tried to get away from that. And so having the strengths and opportunities report go to the students and give them information based on the categories that we've attached to the questions really has decreased a lot of that. For example, if you look on I know this is really small and I apologize, the left-hand page, there's a category of spinal cord injury and there's a category of osteogenesis. And for this particular student, it's a quiz. There's not that many questions on it, but she missed 1 out of 2 of the spinal cord, but she got the osteogenesis correct. So that gives them an idea of, okay, I need to study this area a little more. We've also tagged them with Bloom's taxonomy, and as you can see, this student did really well on all of the recall and understanding questions, not so well on the analyzing and applying questions. So that tells us and the student that they can memorize, but that they're having a little more trouble with the interpretation piece. So what I wanted to kind of go through and sum up were some of the things that we have run into trouble with. Smart watches are kind of on the horizon. They're not widespread yet, but they're going to be. And they're not going to be used as much for data collection as they are for the new version of the cheat sheet. So again, we just went to a policy of everybody takes their watch off. There's a clock running on the app, so time is not an issue. You can put a calculator on the test if they need to use a calculator function, so there really is no need for the watch. Well, Google Glass in the public sector has kind of gone away. It is still out there. There are other Google Glass-like devices coming out, so if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, that's the next version that we got to watch for, are the glasses components that could either do data capture or data provision. The low-tech version is they have their phones out during the delayed review, and we just have to make sure that everything's off desks, everything's put away, nobody's snuck a new piece of paper in, any of those kinds of things. So the list of our current policies, just for your review, that's completely clear, nothing on it. And we really went to this including the water and food kind of thing because that's the way their board exam is given, and they have a 5-hour test to take for board certification that they will have nothing in the room with them but the computer. So we have gone to completely nothing on the desk other than the scratch paper that we give them. And again, we tend to identify that scratch paper with a unique symbol so they can't just pull in a piece of paper and say, oh yeah, this is the one I used. There are grade consequences if things are not complied with, like downloading ahead of time, making sure that they have appropriate amounts of memory or power. We do shred all of the scratch paper. I say an apology to trees every time we do it, but that's a whole lot less paper than it used to be when we were doing paper testing. Um, they have to have the upload done prior to leaving the room. It used to be a bit of a challenge. Again, we have 210 students in the program. If you look at Wi-Fi, the average student has 2 to 3 devices on the Wi-Fi at any given time, especially now that our students have iPads. So they come in, they put their phones on Wi-Fi to save their data rate. They have their laptop on Wi-Fi. They have their iPad on Wi-Fi. So that's about 700 hits to our Wi-Fi in that class, in the classroom areas of our building at one time. But our IT department has been fabulous about making sure that we have the bandwidth to do that, especially now that they don't have to test online, that all the testing is done offline. So because they're scattered in their leaving of the test, it's usually not a problem to make sure that it is uploaded before they leave. Um, we do use the review. Some faculty use it with every test. Some only use it with a few. I generally don't use it with any now. I had too many students in tiers, so I tend to meet with them individually. But you do have that secure review done while you're still in that testing environment or when you mock that testing environment up again in a delayed time. So it does make it really nice with the iPad to be able to do it in a consistent manner with everyone, and you don't have to worry about this person's laptop screen or that person's tablet to take care of it. Okay, I ran through that quicker than I thought.